Televised debate of the runoff campaign, a chance to hear from both candidates before Election Day. With us tonight are Keva Landrum and Jason Williams, and of course, because of the pandemic, we are staying socially distant and they are joining us remotely. Now, Ms. Landrum is a former Orleans Parish criminal court judge. She stepped down to run for DA. She served as interim DA from 2007 to 2008 and was elected judge in 2008. Also with us is City Councilman at Large Jason Williams, who is a criminal defense attorney who has served on the New Orleans City Council since 2014. Thank you both for joining us.
Good evening.
Thank you.
We're going to jump right into our questions right now. For this first section of the program, we will ask questions of both of you. Each of you will have 1 minute to respond. We will hold you to the time limits throughout the program, and you will hear a sound when your time is up. That is the sound you hear right there. We begin now with a question, this one directed towards Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, you stated that you would not give up your private civil law practice if you become district attorney. Now, given the past DAs having to put in 10 to 12 hours a day or more on the job, how could you manage to give the public your undivided attention to this important position, especially given your additional distraction of fighting federal tax charges? That's 1 minute to answer.
Well, what I said was I would be fully focused on the job as DA, just as I've been fully focused on the job as being a council member at large, where I've worked to pass legislation to decriminalize marijuana, where I have worked to create municipal bail reform, where I have finally achieved parity for the public defender's office. I am fully focused on the job that I have now, as well as being a parent, as well as running this campaign and meeting as many voters as I can. DAs throughout this state oftentimes have a private practice. The private practice has not distracted me from my job on the city council, and it certainly has no bearing on the job that I will do as DA. Part of what you get by getting someone from the private sector is someone that's not going to put up with the tremendous amount of fat that has been plaguing the DA's budget for years. Having lawyers who have slush fund jobs for almost $100,000, but not doing any of the work at Tulane and Broad. I am going to run the DA's office like a small boutique law firm that is fully focused on delivering real results, real public safety, and real reform for the people of this city.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Landrum, I want to give you 20 or 30 seconds if you'd like to respond to that question.
Well, I think the fact is this, that is the answer for someone who has no experience in the district attorney's office, assuming that that is a job that you can still keep a private law firm. Unlike other parishes, Orleans Parish has a bifurcated law system, and so criminal district court and civil district court sit separately. And in fact, being the district attorney in Orleans Parish Court is a full-time job. Our attorneys go to court every day, unlike in other parishes. And so this is something where we need a district attorney who's going to dedicate themselves 100% to the job.
Ms. Landrum, you mentioned your experience. Now, next question directed towards you. There are numerous mentions of your previous prosecution methods, now both as acting DA and judge in handling marijuana cases. Now, according to our partners at the Times-Picayune and New Orleans Advocate, you have a history of upcharging second and third degree marijuana possession charges to felonies. Can you defend those actions, and how do you plan to bring some sort of reform to the DA's office?
So what I'll tell you is that in the time when I was the acting district attorney, at that time, marijuana second and third offenses were felonies under the law. We have since evolved as a community, as a state, and the laws have changed, and those offenses are now misdemeanors, excuse me. But the most important thing about marijuana is that, I don't even know why that is a campaign issue. Because about a year ago, our city council and our police department both issued mandates that people were not going to be arrested for possession of marijuana, and we were not going to prosecute simple possession of marijuana in criminal district court or in the DA's office. So for over a year, we've not arrested a single citizen for simple possession of marijuana. We've not prosecuted a simple possession case in over a year. And so this is just a way for Mr. Williams to try and mislead the citizens of New Orleans. I have dedicated myself and committed that we will not continue or we will not prosecute marijuana cases. But this is really just a non-issue because we've not done that in over a year in our city.
Ms. Landrum, thank you. Mr. Williams, want to give you an opportunity to respond to that comment.
Thank you so much. We haven't done that in almost a year because I wrote the legislation to decriminalize marijuana, telling police officers not to arrest people for something that people were starting businesses for in other states. And what Keva has wrong here, back in 2008, the law is the same as it is now with regards to marijuana third and fourth offense. But DAs in 2008 and other parishes use their discretion to not put people in jail for 5 to 10 years for a joint. That is morally reprehensible. The crime rate was skyrocketing, and this did not make us safer.
Well, we're talking about the crime rate. Let's stick with that. This is a question that will go towards both of you. Now, we're seeing a spike in violent crime across this city currently, and an unfortunate large number of our city's youth that are involved in that crime. Now, under the current district attorney, many of those juvenile offenders were tried as adults. What can we do to keep our kids out of the criminal justice system? And this is sort of a double question here for those who are already in it. How do you plan to move forward in prosecuting these cases? Since we ended with you, Mr. Williams, we'll go back to you.
Well, number one, I'm gonna if a child has to be held in custody, unlike what's been going under the Landrum administration, what's going on in the Canizero administration, I'm going to keep young people in an appropriate juvenile facility if they have to be detained. But I'm also going to get involved in schools and meet with educators, young people, to make sure that we understand what the root causes are to try to prevent crime. Crime prevention is a big part of this thing because we can stop people from becoming victims. We also need more tools than just no jail, in jail. And I want to bring Son of a Saint, Youth Empowerment Project, and a host of other mental health and addiction intervention services along with restorative justice to bear so that we have a continuum of services so we can meet kids where they are depending on what their serious needs may be. And when we do that, we can make sure that a kid comes through the juvenile system one time rather than coming in and out of the system. But we cannot try to use fear-mongering to make folks think that every young black male that's walking around on our streets is dangerous, because that's simply not the case.
All right, Mr. Williams, Ms. Landrum, would you like to respond? 1 minute.
Sure. You know, what I've had the opportunity to do is talk to the juvenile court judges and assess what is going on in juvenile court and get an idea of what's happening with our kids in our communities that get involved in the court system. And one of the things that they're saying is that we need to really build support for the entire family and have wraparound services for the entire family. Because what we're seeing is that our kids are dealing with traumatic instances and oftentimes need support, whether it be mental health issues, whether it be substance abuse issues, and they are not being connected with those services. And so it is going to be important, and I am going to commit as our next district attorney to make sure that we start bridging that gap. So that means bringing together our community actors, treating the trauma that our children have suffered with, also bringing them the support of whether it be substance abuse, mental health, but not just treating the child, bringing those supportive services to the families and to the caretakers of those children. And
Ms. Landrum and Mr. Williams, thank you so much. This is another question that is for both of you, and you have 1 minute to respond to us here. This has certainly been a year of racial reckoning for this country, and there are demands for accountability, there are demands for transparency in the social and the criminal justice system. What specific policy changes would you adopt to address the racial and economic disparities that have plagued our justice system if elected as DA? Ms. Landrum, I'll start with you.
So there are several policies within the district attorney's office that I would make changes to help address those racial inequities. The first and foremost is going to be standing at the forefront of the bail system that we need to reform. And so that is going to be where I will come together as a system and make sure that we address bail reform. Also within the office, I'm going to address the way in which we utilize the multiple offender statute. We are not going to utilize that statute anymore. And the way I draw the analogy is that it has been used as a sword, chopping people off at the knees instead of shielding the community from the most violent offenders. And we are not going to continue to chop people off at the knees. And more importantly, we're not going to use plea bargains that have been driving up the mass incarceration rate. We're also going to train our lawyers and investigators about racial biases and implicit biases, and also about how to choose juries so that therefore we can start bridging this gap and move this system forward so that we can cure a lot of what we have seen. You know, unfortunately,
Ms. Landrum, thank you so much. Your 1 minute is up. Mr. Williams, 1 minute to respond to that question.
First and foremost, every single lawyer in that office is going to have to reapply and answer a set of hypothetical questions to check them for implicit racist and gender bias. We're also going to work with the ADL and the ACLU to have regular implicit bias training to make this office, this institution, not just not racist and not just not sexist, but anti-racist and anti-sexist, so the institutions are fair to all of the community, whether you live next to Ottoman Park or Shakespeare Park. We're going to go a step further, though. We're going to make sure that we are working to end mass incarceration for low-level nonviolent offenders. We are the worst offenders in the country and the most incarcerated country in the world, and it has to stop.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and continue talking about incarcerations and also wrongful convictions. New Orleans has a terrible track record for wrongful convictions. There was a program the DA's office agreed to partner with the Innocence Project of New Orleans and Public Defender's Office to form a conviction integrity unit. Well, that city council and you, at your urging, Mr. Williams, even kicked in $200,000 for that project, but it was a failure and the current DA scrapped that program. Now, given that these programs have a strong record of success in other cities, could you tell the voters why it failed and if you would revive it here in New Orleans? I'll begin with you, Mr. Williams. 1 minute to respond.
I will absolutely revive that program and I will staff it. I'm actively recruiting Emily Mall, the former director of the Innocence Project, who helped us stand up that first conviction review unit. We have to have it. We have to confront the sins of the past. It failed because we had a DA at the helm who was trained under Harry Connick, just as Keva Landrum was trained under Harry Connick. And they, for the most part, always look to have someone plead guilty to a manslaughter rather than letting an innocent person go free. And no justice is served when that occurs. And so we have to make sure that we're honest when there's clear evidence of an innocent person being in jail, that we release them and give them their good name back. And that is what a real conviction review unit will do. We will confront the sins of the past as well as look at excessive sentences as well, because there's a number of people who are sitting in jail right now rotting for sentences that are far beyond what justice truly dictates.
Mr. Williams, thank you. Ms. Landrum, you have 1 minute to respond.
So I'm absolutely committed to having a conviction review unit. You know, let me say this to you. My training as a prosecutor and my experience as a prosecutor in the years in which I worked, I was never in any way implicated by doing anything improper. My integrity has never been questioned. You know, Mr. Williams himself been a part of the same criminal justice system for 20 years, making millions and millions of dollars, defending people and pleading people guilty in the same system. And so now he wants to stand up and proclaim himself the agent of change. And it's simply just not the case. And we really just cannot believe this rhetoric that he's bringing. The fact is this, and it's clear. I have experience in this system, and he simply has none. I've prosecuted cases, I've been a judge and presided over cases, and Jason Williams simply has no experience and is not fit to be our next district attorney.
Mr. Williams, would you like to respond to those comments? About 30 seconds to respond.
I would. Keva knows I was a judge back in 2003 before
you were not a judge. You weren't elected a judge.
And she also knows, I'm going to talk to the people now. I'm not going to bicker. She also knows that when she was DEA, she was in possession of a file that showed that Robert Jones was innocent of a crime that he had been serving time for. When that case came before her as a judge, she kept him in jail another 8 years because she would not let that evidence come in until the Fourth Circuit took her off of the case. And so that tells you everything you need to know about how she sees people and the lack of humanity that she has in people. And this next DA's office, this next 6 years, we have to impart some humanity in the criminal legal system because it has been void of it and our public safety benefits show it.
Okay, Mr. Williams, Ms. Landrum, actually that leads us to our next question. One of your opponent's campaign ads against you features Robert Jones, a wrongfully convicted man who now works for the Public Defender's Office, just one of his many accomplishments since he was released after serving 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. As judge and interim DA, you did make decisions to prolong Jones's time in prison. You ultimately had to be removed from that case by another judge. But if Jones were in front of you right now, what would you have to say to him?
Well, let me say this. Robert Jones was convicted in 1996 for those crimes, and I was a law student. And so I in no way had anything to do with Mr. Jones's conviction or any evidence that was presented in his case. And so the facts and the false narrative that Jason Williams wants to present is just a way for him to try and deceive the voters of New Orleans. And more importantly, as he sits here and tells people that he was a judge, that again is a false narrative. He was never elected a judge. He took a sabbatical from his law practice for a few months and was able to pass along a few cases. He's never really presided over cases, had to make rulings on cases, and so he was not a judge. And so for him to compare maybe 6 months of a time to my 12 years presiding over hundreds and thousands of cases is really just no comparison at all. And so the fact is this. I have committed myself to making sure that the things that happened in Mr. Jones's case by those prosecutors in 1996 would never happen under my administration. And so that is why I'm going to make sure that we have open file discovery, making sure we have a conviction review unit, and that we operate with integrity and dignity in the district attorney's office.
And Mr. Williams, would you like to make a response to that? About 30 seconds.
I would. There is no integrity in keeping a file secret for an additional 8 years. Robert Jones's mother died during those 8 years, and you owe him an apology, and you just had a chance to do it, and you did not. That tells the voters everything they need to know about who to vote for this Saturday.
All right, Mr.
So
Williams.
what I'll say is this. What speaks to the voters is the fact that Jason Williams is trying to drag the voters into his personal legal battle. He is under an 11-count indictment, and he wants the voters to elect someone and bring them down this road. We know that his case now wouldn't be tried at least until March. It is unfair for him to ask the voters to elect a district attorney under this cloud of uncertainty and whose integrity is in question.
All right, thank you, Ms. Landrum, and thank you to Mr. Williams. We're going to move to the second part of our program where the candidates will ask a question of each other. We'll begin with a question from Mr. Williams to Ms. Landrum. Ms. Landrum, you will have 90 seconds to answer. Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
So in 2008, when you were interim DA, and I suppose you were not really a DA at the time, if I wasn't really a judge when I was an interim judge, off-duty NOPD officers savagely beat, kicked, spit on black RTA workers at the Beach Corner Grill. There were 40 witnesses. You chose not to charge a single person with those racially motivated beatings, not Leon Canizaro's son-in-law. Can you explain to the voters, if you could not hold police accountable with 40 plus witnesses, how can they expect for you to hold police accountable now?
Well, what I'll tell you is this. My record of holding police officers accountable is very clear. I held the police officers accountable in the Danziger Bridge case. And during the time when I was the interim district attorney, we had a very unique relationship and tenuous relationship with the New Orleans Police Department. We were an office that was struggling financially. We were attempting to get the police department to be upfront with us, and they were not. They were threatening the lives of the prosecutors who were attempting to hold them accountable. And so we had to seek the help of the federal government. We did that in the Danziger Bridge case, and we also did it in the Beach Corner case. But more importantly, as a prosecutor, I tried police officers who assaulted women in the line of duty. In fact, you defended those same police officers, that same police officer. And so I am the only person in this race who has a history of holding police officers accountable. As a judge, I sentenced a police officer who was held accountable for shooting someone in the line of duty. You, on the other hand, have defended people who have been racist, and you know that. And so the fact is, me holding police officers accountable is a proven fact, and I will do it as our district attorney. I will hold them accountable not only for charges, but also if they have misconduct in their work, in the way in which they police our communities, in the way in which they interact with our citizens. And I stand proud on my record as our interim district attorney, and I stand proud on my record as a judge.
Well, before we move on to asking the question for Mr. Williams, I want to give you an opportunity, Mr. Williams, to respond to Ms. Landrum.
Sure. It sounds as if what Keva is saying is because of a financial crisis, she was not able to hold the police accountable. We are in the middle of the biggest financial crisis that this city will ever see, pray God. And if you can't do a difficult thing during difficult times, that tells the voters what they need to know.
All right, Mr. Williams, thank you so much. Now a question for Mr. Williams from Ms. Landrum. Mr. Williams will have 90 seconds to answer that question. Go ahead, Ms. Landrum.
You have misled the people about my record and my experiences with false narratives. You were once a supporter and a donor for Leon Canizero, but now you say that he is behind your federal indictment. And you've made millions of dollars representing criminals, but now you proclaim yourself to be an agent of change. As a candidate for district attorney under an 11-count federal indictment, how can the people of New Orleans trust you to be our next district attorney?
They can trust me the same way that you trusted me for 20 plus years when you called me a friend. You have seen the file in this case, and you've said yourself that you thought it was baseless. You have held my newborn son. We were friends, and you have denied my presumption of innocence. And if you're saying because I am charged with a crime, because Billy Schultz sent a text message saying he was going to cut me off at the knees, because Bill Barr came down to New Orleans and said, do not elect a progressive DA. It goes against the grain of Donald Trump's brand of policing and prosecuting. If you will deny someone you called a friend for 20 years their presumption of innocence, then how can the people of New Orleans expect for you to give them their presumption of innocence or their due process? I have not been distracted on the city council. I have achieved parity for the public defender's office. I have created a citizen advisory board to review the criminal justice budgets. I have decriminalized marijuana. I have initiated municipal bail reform and balanced the budget at the worst time this city will ever see, the worst financial crisis, all while all of this is going on. So I think it's pretty clear that you might be projecting your work ethic onto me.
All right, Ms. Landrum, I want to give you an opportunity to respond. You have about 30 seconds.
So, Jason, do you not take any accountability for anything that you do? At any time, do you not think that this is about the people of New Orleans and not about you? More importantly, this is not about a friendship. You know, the fact is that your record of not being trustworthy is very clear. The fact is you have served as our criminal justice chair, but continue to have a private practice defending criminals in criminal district court. You have also failed to recuse yourself from the budget hearing, knowing that you were running for this very office, which is a clear conflict of interest. Everything that you have continued to do has been putting your personal gain and your personal interest and your politics before the people of New Orleans, which proves that you cannot operate as our district attorney with integrity and with trustworthiness. And it's just a fact.
All right, Ms. Landrum, thank you so much for your response. Now, I want to direct this question to the both of you, beginning with Mr. Williams. Given all of that we have discussed this evening, whomever takes over as district attorney is walking into several issues. We are still in the midst of a pandemic, which has affected our court system. We are talking about major budget cuts. And as I mentioned earlier, change from what has been what is described as tough on crime policies. How is it that you're both prepared to meet those challenges in such an unprecedented year? Mr. Williams, I'll begin with you.
Well, I'll start by saying it almost sounded like I was listening to Leon Canizero. I would never expect Keva to be quoting him on a debate when she's running for DA. I'm going to do this job the same way I've done the job on the city council, with transparency, so that we bring the public along for every decision that's made, so they understand that every single reform measure that's put in place has a public safety benefit. I'm going to create dashboards, public-facing dashboards, so the public can log on and see what decisions were made in the DA's office. I plan to publish the DA's budget on the DA's website, that you can see how every single dollar is spent. I plan to be accountable. I plan to work hard, which I clearly have a record of doing. And I plan on researching the best national and international best practices and bringing them to the city of New Orleans, because this country is looking at New Orleans because of our high incarceration rate and high exoneration rate. And if we can get it right here, we can get it right throughout this entire country.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Landrum, the same question to you. 1 minute to respond.
You know, it's very interesting because Jason keeps trying to connect me with other people's administrations, Leon Cannizzaro, and he knows very well that I never worked under Leon Cannizzaro and I never worked with Leon Cannizzaro. But the fact is this, when you listen to what he says I. And the fact is that none of this can be done by any one individual alone. And it goes to the fact that I said that he continues to put his own personal interest and personal gain before that of the people. In order to make any achievements as our next DA, this is going to be about a partnership. Partnerships with our law enforcement agencies, partnerships with our court, partnerships with our community. That is the only way we are going to be able to be successful moving this office forward, being able to prioritize violent crime, being able to make sure that on low-level nonviolent offenders, we seek alternatives to incarceration and move those outside of the system so that we can get this court system going in light of this pandemic.
All right, Ms. Landrum, Mr. Williams, thank you both so much. That brings us to the end of our program. We want to give each candidate now 1 minute for a closing statement, and we will begin with Ms. Landrum.
Sure. Thank you. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to be able to connect with our New Orleans citizens once again. You know, the only way for us to move this district attorney's office forward and to make sure that it operates with integrity and honesty is to actually elect an official and a leader that possesses those qualities. As a former prosecutor and judge, my integrity and my honesty has never been questioned. Jason Williams, on the other hand, expects the citizens of New Orleans to elect him to be our next district attorney as he battles an 11-count federal indictment. This simply just cannot happen. I have spent my entire career as a dedicated public servant, and I plan to do so again 100% of the time as our next district attorney. For the last 20 years, Jason Williams has been milking the system, making millions of dollars off of the criminal justice system for his clients, never, ever, ever speaking up once before. But now he wants us to believe that somehow he is an agent of change. The people of New Orleans deserve better and should demand better. And I am going to make sure we achieve the goals of keeping our city safe while achieving public safety and moving this city forward. I would appreciate your vote this Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Landrum. Mr. Williams.
Well, as you've heard for the past 30 minutes, my opponent has not offered a single solitary concrete plan about what she wants to do to move the office forward, because she is relying upon the same old practices that made us the incarceration capital of the world, as well as the exoneration capital of the world, meaning we were arresting innocent people. Today, we stand at a critical moment in our history with a real chance to bring reform and equality to our justice system, but it does not come easy. And we can't expect the same people who broke the system to be the ones that fixed it. I haven't done anything where I was the only one who stood up when Leon Cannizzaro was issuing bogus subpoenas, when he was putting rape survivors in jail and domestic abuse survivors in jail, when she, as a judge with a front row seat on the bench, sat quietly and in fact signed 12 of those warrants for Leon Cannizzaro. It is time to stand up and speak out and tell the old guard their day is done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, and thank you to Ms. Landrum for taking part in tonight's program. Certainly an interesting evening. Oh, remember, Election Day is Saturday. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good night.
Thanks, you too.